My name is Charlie Agnew. I am the Managing Director of Energy Services here at CES. I've been working with my colleague, Elliot Boyd, among others here at CES to prepare a presentation for you. Elliot and I will walk you through our update today on the landscape for Maine solar. And I think we're just about ready to get started. So a couple administrative items. If you do have questions, we ask that you please put those into the chat. We can, Elliot and I will get organized to answer those after about 25 minutes of presentation material here. We'll switch to Q&A. So please type those into the chat. If you're also having any technical issues, please use the chat feature. I think Casey will be available to see if she can help you there. But we'll kick things off here, and I'll turn it over to Elliot now that you've digested all of these key terms that we're going to talk about today. You have no excuse not to remember all of these industry acronyms that we use, KW and megawatts and RECs, renewable energy credits. These are going to be used throughout the presentation today, and perhaps most important is NEB, or the Net Energy Billing Program, which is the subject of today's discussion. So Elliot, why don't you run us through the agenda, and we'll kick things off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charlie. And I'd also like to extend a thanks for everybody for joining us here this morning. And we'll kick things off by going through the agenda here. So for starters, we'll provide a quick introduction to CES, who we are, what we're doing here. And then we're going to dive into Maine solar, talk a little bit about, why there's so much buzz around solar development here in Maine, with a particular focus on the Net Energy Billing Program and the mechanics of that program as well. And then we're going to walk through some of the challenges that are being faced by the solar industry regarding project development, as well as interconnection to the grid. And then lastly, we're going to cover some of the relevant news coming out of the legislature in Augusta, as well as some of the keys to picking a good project. And also, lastly and importantly, how our team here at CES can help you. So we'll move to the next slide here and provide some quick background about competitive energy services. So here at CES, we're an energy brokerage and consultant firm. We were established back in 1999. And we've got offices in both Portland, Maine and Topsfield, Massachusetts. And our clients are located really across the US and Canada. So we offer a variety of procurement and consulting services. And CES, we pride ourselves on being a supplier and technology neutral company. We're always operating by putting our clients first here. So much of our recent work is with companies and universities who are looking to manage electricity costs and also planning for a more sustainable future. So as we move to the next slide, and relevant to our discussion today, we wanted to highlight some of the sustainability service offerings and also some of the select clients that we've worked with recently. So our services in this department range from greenhouse gas tracking to energy master planning, as well as alternative fuel feasibility. If you're interested in learning more about our sustainability work, you can reach out to either Charlie or myself or anyone on the CES team here, and we'd love to provide you some additional detail and discuss your options. So more relevant to our presentation today, it's the offsite solar procurement work that we've done to help our clients in Maine really leverage this opportunity brought upon by the Net Energy Billing Program here in Maine. So the goal of our webinar is to keep you informed on the solar landscape here in Maine. And without further delay here, I'm going to hand the microphone back to Charlie, who's going to kick things off by walking us through what all the buzz is about here with Maine Solar. So Charlie, you can take it away.
Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, we can really just distill the interest and all the activity in around solar recently in the state of Maine to this net energy billing policy that was established under LD 1711 back in June of 2019, which created a very high value for the megawatt hours exported from a qualified renewable energy project, which could be wind, solar, or hydro, less than 5 megawatts in nameplate capacity, and delivering that electricity to the local utility grid. In the state of Maine, that would be Central Maine Power or Versant territory up in Bangor. And the method for calculating the credit value under the net energy billing program was defined in this legislation as a formula consisting of both supply and delivery costs. So the supply piece is represented by the standard offer rate for the account customer rate class that's receiving the credit, plus 75% of the delivery rate for a small general service or SGS customer. So this formula is obviously written into the legislation. The calculation is fairly simple. The rate that these qualified facilities are compensated is all equal across any type of technology or project size. Everyone receives the same credit rate calculated by this formula, where if you had 7.5 cents or $75 per megawatt hour supply costs under standard offer, plus a 6 cent or $60 per megawatt hour delivery tariff, the total credit value would equal $120 per megawatt hour, 1,000 kilowatt hours. And each year, these rates are going to be reset, published in early December, at least for the past 2 years. And you can see in front of you the value of these credits for each customer rate class, ranging from $120 to $125 for roughly for the Central Maine Power customers per megawatt hour, and $130 to $143 for most of the Versant customers. So no matter what project you contract with, the credits issued by the utility are always going to be the same and determined by this formula, which again indexed to the price of electricity and will change over time. Now, the other side of the equation here is what you have to pay for those credits, and that's ultimately based on the contract that you have with or enter with a solar facility. We've seen the common form of that contract being a net energy bill credits agreement, or NEBCA, typically with one of 2 or 3 pricing structures, where you may agree to pay a fixed rate for the credits on a $1 per megawatt hour basis. Let's say that was $90 per megawatt hour. You could also be paying the project with a fixed rate with an annual escalator to that price, which escalates over time. And last, perhaps more commonly shared pricing structure is a payment rate that is simply a discount to the value of that credit. Again, the value of that credit, being let's say $120. If, let's say, you enter a discount structured agreement with a 25% discount, your payment rate would be that 25% less than $120 or $90, and that's going to float depending on the net energy billing credit rate. So those are generally the pricing structures we've seen in the market. Obviously, the differential between what you have to pay for that credit and the value of that credit is representative of your potential savings. So we're talking in these examples somewhere around 3 cents per kilowatt hour or $30 per megawatt hour in savings. And in addition to that, these projects also generate an environmental attribute, which is optional whether you retain control of that attribute. But this is the claim, in addition to the utility credit, the financial credit on your utility bill, the renewable energy credits are really your claim to the carbon reduction from the project. So where that's important you should be paying attention to the ownership of the renewable energy credits, and you'll want to retain ownership of them. Should you choose to sell those renewable energy credits, the present value for those is about $40 per megawatt hour. So this is significant. It's even greater perhaps than some of the bill credit value. So important to keep that the renewable energy credits in your sites. Just an example of how the mechanics of these contracts work. In this three-way example here, you have a client that may be you, the customer consumer of electricity, enters into one of these contracts with a solar developer and project, which they use that contract to finance the construction of one of these 5 megawatt solar facilities. Once that facility is operational, generates electricity that gets delivered to the utility grid. Let's just say that's Central Maine Power. In exchange for that kilowatt hour, Central Maine Power converts that into a dollar credit on the customer's utility bill or any number of customer utility bills. And then in exchange for that credit, the client would be paying back the project for those credits at hopefully a discount to the value of the credit. So it's kind of the mechanics of the program, just to get everybody oriented today. But the real meat and potatoes of our presentation was in around kind of what's happening in the development arena. So back to you, Elliot. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So as Charlie outlined, the incentives here are pretty significant, and as you can imagine, and I'm sure you've seen, these incentives have created a flurry of solar activity, so to speak, here in Maine. So we wanted to dig into some of the interconnection issues that are being faced by the Maine solar industry. And the first topic here relates to substation voltage concerns, and these concerns have been raised by Central Maine Power. I think the key piece of context to understand here is that both the CMP and Versant electricity grid infrastructure, these grids weren't designed to support these distributed generation facilities popping up across the state. And early last month, CMP notified a number of solar developers who had interconnection agreements in place that there was additional studies being conducted to determine whether the infrastructure was sufficient to address the fluctuations in voltage proposed at the substations around the state. So, after further discussion, CMP released a list of substations, and you can see the graph here on the right. We've got a pie chart showing the percent failure or pass rate for this study. So of the initial 110 substations identified for these concerns, about 1/3 have been cleared for interconnection, while roughly 65% of these projects are going to require voltage upgrades to accommodate the solar transmission. So initially, the cost estimates posed by CMP actually exceeded 7 figures per substation in some cases. As you can imagine, these additional proposed costs, they sent some shock waves through the Maine solar industry, and they actually created some pushback from both the governor's office and the press alike. So following further consideration, there was a more cost-effective solution presented by CMP, and this solution puts a price tag on these substation upgrades ranging between $200,000 and $500,000. So the discussion continues on how much of that cost is going to be carried by developers and how it's going to be shared amongst developers. The other interconnection challenge here that we face in Maine, the other piece of this interconnection puzzle, so to speak, are the cluster studies that are being conducted by both Central Maine Power and ISO New England. And these studies are focused on the reliability of the grid, and particularly how the interconnection of these solar projects in these specific regions are going to impact both the transmission of electricity and the reliability of their distribution systems. So as it stands, there's approximately 15 areas that are being studied by CMP and ISO New England. And based on proposed timelines, we're expecting all of these cluster studies to be wrapped up with conclusions by early November. And the takeaway here, these cluster studies, they could present a delay for construction timelines for some projects. But the core takeaway for the interconnection story here today is that both the voltage concerns and cluster studies, they're going to create some speed bumps in the short term. But as it stands today, CES hasn't heard of or identified any major issues that will prevent these projects from coming online over the course of these next few years. So that's the story as it stands with interconnection, and I think the next piece of the conversation here relates to the Maine legislature and some of the proposed bills coming down the pipeline here. So I can pass it back over to Charlie.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. Just to add a little discussion on this, obviously we focused on Central Maine Power, a couple of these points. The cluster studies apply to both utility areas. This substation voltage issue for the time being is really one unique to Central Maine Power. But certainly, there are going to be challenges with both utilities. There's a bit more insight and transparency to what's happening behind Central Maine Power, thus kind of our focus there. So good update, and we'll move into some of what's happening from a legislative perspective and what to anticipate next coming out of Augusta. And this can apply for those that are already participating in the energy billing program, have entered these contracts, or are still considering doing so. So maybe first a little bit of background on how we ended up where we are. Initially, the net energy billing legislation targeted kind of this a participation level or development level, I should say, that equal 10% of each of the utilities' peak loads. And there was essentially a trigger at 10% where the Public Utilities Commission was obligated to or required to review the effectiveness of this net energy billing program in achieving state policy goals and providing benefit to ratepayers at a point when that 10%, quote unquote, cap was hit. Now, for CMP, this happened in May of 2020. Versant was a little bit after that, and later in November of 2020, the PUC issued this report, and just for reference, as we stand today, there are over 6,300 projects in the Central Maine Power interconnection queue. So these are projects that have proposed or requested study for interconnection, representing over 1,100 megawatts of capacity. So there's been a huge amount of interest in the program, and obviously this cap was intended to kind of look at whether or not this program was effective in achieving the state's goals. So what we saw in that Public Utilities Commission report was kind of distilled down here into a impact to ratepayers, both total revenue and rate impact of an estimated $161 million per year. And for CMP and Versant customers, this would lead to a 21 to 23% increase in transmission and distribution rates. And this was really a focused report on cost. There have been quite a bit of questions and arguments that this program this report doesn't really capture all of the benefits of the program. There's recently the solar advocates have put forward and referenced a separate study done by Daymark Energy Advisors that highlights some other benefits of the energy billing program and the distributed generation resources that were not captured by the Public Utilities Commission. But overall, the reason we're here today is that the public has been made aware, and the legislature has been made aware of the potential cost of this program, whether that number of 161 million is right or wrong. Really, the legislature is now tasked with addressing this potential energy billing program cost and really balancing that with the state's renewable energy goals. And there is a little bit of context for this this assessment of how well this is meeting our goals in really a separate Public Utilities Commission procurement process to satisfy the state's renewable portfolio standard requirements, where the PUC had secured power purchase agreements with some utility scale projects, renewable energy projects, solar specifically, under $40 per megawatt hour. So we have, in very simple terms, I think some folks are looking at the energy billing program cost and saying that these program credits are costing $120 per megawatt hour, whereas through a separate process, the Public Utilities Commission was able to secure power purchase agreements for under $40 a megawatt hour, and there's kind of a simplistic comparison of those two numbers, and really this has all led to a number of bills proposed in this current legislative session that would put some limits on the net energy billing program. There's been one LD 709 that appears to have support across the industry, which will do one of a few things here. First is it creates a moratorium on new projects qualifying for net energy billing based on when those projects essentially applied to enter the interconnection queue. So anything after January 1st, 2021, applying for and requesting interconnection would not qualify. Now, if you remember from the previous slide, there were over 6,300 projects that were already in the queue. This would limit that by no more than a few dozen. So this is not a very high bar, and this will not ultimately block a lot of these projects from potentially being built. Not that they all will, but this is not a very restrictive moratorium. What does cause some concern is that the moratorium could extend to June 30th. It's possible the legislature or this bill may extend that moratorium out until November 1st, while a stakeholder group reviews the program and makes a recommendation on the future of the energy billing program. And the real takeaway here is that the industry and the legislature, Governor's Energy Office and PUC are all very aware that protecting the projects that have already started development at any stage is critical. And so, retroactively changing any of the program rules is really going to throw a bucket of cold water on the development industry in Maine, and creates an issue where we have a governor and clean energy goals that are going to require a lot of investment and development of renewable energy in the state over the coming years. And what they do not want to do is harm the future by ultimately creating or pulling the rug out from underneath the development community at this point in time. So as it stands, existing projects do appear to be protected. Anything, these kind of newborn projects after January 1st are likely not going to qualify. But over the course of this year, we are going to anticipate some changes being made to the energy billing program that might limit this opportunity going forward. So what may be important to you are some key points in how to select these projects if you are still considering that. First, pricing, the project pricing structure is critical, and also the renewable energy credit ownership, as I mentioned, is a huge part of the financial picture here. Most of the contracts that we've worked on have been for 20-year terms. This is consistent with LD 1711 and the legislation enabling net energy billing. But we've seen certain developers offering early termination options, which give some exit points for customers and clients like yourself. However, to gain that ability, a termination option in these agreements, we've seen that you have to give up a significant portion of the economic value here. Since a termination option presents a significant financial risk to the developer, they're going to charge you for that type of option. So certainly keeping in mind as you evaluate these projects, the interconnection challenges that we've discussed, but also whether or not these project developers have control of the site where the project's being developed, and whether or not they've progressed through some of the necessary state and local permits, which can take some time. All of this needs to be considered when evaluating these projects. And maybe lastly here, most important, as we've discussed, is to make sure that the project will qualify for the net energy billing program based on any changes we see in this current legislative session. So what we're doing for our clients is making sure that we cast a broad net across the development community. There are dozens of developers in Maine right now. So we think casting a broad net is prudent and has proven valuable for our work. Where clients and customers can diversify and participate in multiple projects to reduce development risk, we think that's valuable. And it's always important to weigh, both price and the certain development hurdles that the project may be facing or over the top of when selecting a project in order to de-risk that, the development potential. So some of the things that we look at, and you should as well, and I'll just wrap today's content with some numbers. CES has been highly involved in the state of Maine over the past 2 years. We've worked with over 70 of our clients, representing them and their interests in entering, I think, over 700 net energy billing credit agreements for, over 65 of these 1 to 5 megawatt solar and hydro projects. And we've done so with over 13 different developers. And this all builds on some experience we've gained in the past 7 or 8 years in southern New England under similar programs, where we were involved in about 250 megawatts of new solar in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, At this point, we would more than double that with all of our activity here in the state of Maine just over the past year. Part of our work is also in monitoring the ongoing performance of these projects, making sure that they do come online, that the utilities are issuing the credits in the right quantity and at the right value, and ultimately the payments going back to the developers are accurate to ensure that these agreements perform over time. So we certainly stay involved to make sure these projects perform as expected. And yeah, appreciate everyone's attention here. That concludes our presentation material for today, and we'll jump right into the Q&A. We'll plan to do, looking at the time here, we'll plan for another 10 minutes of Q&A. I've got some that were teed up through your registration links. We'll jump right into those, and then Elliot, if we get anything through the chat here, maybe you can let me know about that. So, so here we go. A few questions that we got as you registered. What are the likely impacts of the utilities pushing some of the infrastructure cost upgrades off on the solar fields? It's a great question. Certainly one that is all the developers are sensitive to. But it's important to understand that there is a bit of cost sharing here for any project interconnecting to the utility. When those applications are made, the utilities study that cost, and for the most part, pass, in most cases, most of the project interconnection costs on to the developers. This most recent issue that Elliot outlined, the substation overvoltage or ground fault issue, was one that was a bit unexpected. So one where the utilities had, Central Maine Power had defined the cost of interconnection and then later adjusted that based on some new information, new engineering information. So that came as a surprise to some of these projects. But what we're seeing in general, or so far, is that those cost upgrades are not expected to be too overwhelming. Certainly there may be exceptions to that rule, but if there is a cost sharing amongst one or more of these solar projects attempting to interconnect to the grid, it might not be that big of a cost burden for these projects, and to this point we have not heard much to the contrary there. So we're hoping that this is really a non-issue. Second question, what are the chances the legislation changes substantially, thus making the economics of, say, existing projects poor? I did attempt to outline this, but the answer to this question is, at this point, it does not look like any existing project will be impacted by any change in the current legislative session. Now, you probably heard me there. I mean, this certainly any future legislature could change the rules, but right now, the focus is on kind of maintaining the momentum in bringing more renewable energy to the state of Maine, trying not to cool off the excitement and the progress there. But we do think that this energy billing program might never exist in this form again, or will not exist in this form. It might not exist at all, as the state tries to figure out what the best way forward is to meet both cost and renewable energy objectives. So hopefully that provides some additional color there. The insight into future incentives, what are the anticipated trends based on renewable climate in Maine? One thing I'll say about the LD 709 here is that the moratorium would not apply to projects less than 2 megawatts. Also, any project being developed on a brownfield site, so this might be a contaminated site of some sort, and or landfill, closed cap landfill. And we've seen this in other states where you kind of shift from the green field, the open space development, to incentivizing more distributed and smaller resources that are in targeted areas or that utilize certain, otherwise undevelopable space. That's a common progression, or at least one we've seen in other states. So I think that's where things would be headed with this energy billing program. It's very possible that it just might not exist again, as the legislature has seen, procuring larger scale renewables is far more cost effective in their minds at this point than the energy billing program. And certainly that could be disputed, but that's kind of the word I think that's circulating around Augusta right now. Lastly, when can larger commercial operations take advantage of the energy billing program? The answer is now, and for not very much longer. So larger commercial users are absolutely kind of our bread and butter here, where we focus all of our attention, and everything that I've mentioned so far in terms of the program is kind of thinking about this larger commercial user, or keeping them in mind. So yep, time may be limited, but the absolutely the program is still open, we can say. According to Central Maine Power, there's 6,300 projects that you might choose from. That's probably not a real number, but there are plenty of projects out there, and it comes down to whether they will qualify going forward, and whether the cost of bringing those projects online generates sufficient savings to bring the attention of buyers like yourself. So I've been running along here for a while. Elliot, how are we doing on questions?
Yeah, Charlie, great question. Not too many new questions coming into the feed here. There was a comment about the accuracy of our projected current number of projects that are being considered in CMP's net energy billing cost calculations. And actually, I think I'm going to invite Matt Gamache here, who's one of our attendees, to comment on where that figure is coming from and how it relates back to the presentation.
Good.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. Hopefully folks can hear me, but yeah, I was trying to reply to Nathan. I don't think he's here anymore, but I think the confusion may lie in the number of projects and the framing of those projects. So many of those 6,300 number that Charlie referenced, many of them are small scale projects that are participating in the kilowatt hour volumetric rate program, not the tariff rate program, which is the one that we're primarily focused on in that tariff rate calculation up front in this presentation. However, it's still part of CMP's calculations on the cost of the program. And the number, I just pulled it up, you can take it directly from CMP's filing from 2 weeks ago at the PUC on the cost of the net energy billing program. Just to clarify there. Thanks, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Looks like we do have a question coming in from Kevin Conroy. So what would you forecast to be the final straw or the slow end to the NEB marketplace in Maine? And when would you suggest this could occur? So Charlie, you have any insights there on the forecasted slowdown to the NEB development marketplace here in Maine?
Yeah, I think the slow end, I'm going to use those two words together. The slow end of the program has begun. The final straw is not yet apparent, and I think over the next few months, this is what I alluded to at the beginning, we might need to host another one of these events once this LD is finalized, and certainly if any of the current and critical language in here is changed in any way. But our understanding is that it may not be 6,300 projects, but there are still quite a lot out there that are going to qualify. And so until those projects fail for any number of reasons, or the language of this bill changes to prevent more than a small percentage of those projects from qualifying, I think we'll keep rolling along here. But once this study has been concluded by stakeholder group, again, Governor's Energy Office, Public Utilities Commission, and perhaps others, I think we'll have a bit more information about when or how quickly this opportunity could dry up. But from what we're seeing, there are still plenty of projects out there looking for subscribers, looking for buyers, and so we're optimistic that quick action here in the coming months could lead to still good project opportunities for folks.
Yeah, Charlie, and thanks for that question, Kevin. If anybody else has any final questions here, I know we're marching towards the end time, but feel free to share those questions in the chat.
Yeah, for anyone, we can make things slightly less formal too as we round out. If anyone would like to voice a question and put Elliot on the spot, or myself, feel free to do so. And I'll just keep an eye out. If you go off mute, I'll anticipate your question here. So yeah, but if nothing pops up here, thanks everyone for joining. Certainly we're available if you have any follow-up questions. Some of this information we presented today we may have better an ability to answer more pointed question about your project or your group of projects. If you have those questions, we're happy to help. And as always, appreciate you all as our clients and some perhaps prospective clients. We value your input and participation, and look forward to providing content that's useful and timely for you in managing your energy requirements, and to help you plan for the future. So thanks everyone for joining today. Nice job, Elliot. And thanks to all our team at CES for supporting us in the webinar today. Have a nice day. Thank you, everyone.